It's a normal day in January. You finish your day at work. Well, night technically, as the sun is coming up just as your shift ends. You head home, settle in, and 30 minutes later you get a loud alert on your phone. You think, oh, this is just another storm warning. But this is not a storm warning. It's something much, much more serious.
The U.S. Pacific Command has detected a missile threat to Hawaii. A missile may impact on land or sea within minutes. This is not a drill.
You have 20 minutes until the missile is supposed to reach land. Do you call your loved ones? Seek shelter? Or just sit outside, say your prayers, and accept your fate? Today on Emotive, a special episode with my friend Herbbug, who lives in Hawaii and experienced all of this firsthand. Now, there is more to the story than just the events of those 20 minutes. You see, time is all about perception, and when we go through extreme stress, our senses become heightened, we get an adrenaline dump, and time seems to slow down. Herbbug talks about his life experiences leading up to this fateful day, and how prior traumas and psychedelic trips may have prepared him in a way to not just survive, but thrive in the middle of chaos. I'm your host, Dan Dahlstead, and here is my conversation with my good friend, Herbbug. You can find all relevant links on our website, pod.co/emotive. Well, let me just start by saying welcome back to the show, Herbbug.
Thank you.
Why don't you tell people a little bit about yourself, and if you don't mind, how you came to live in Hawaii?
I was born in Tahiti, French Polynesia. I'm technically French by birth, but at the 2.5, moved back to Hawaii. My parents split, but I don't have any memories of my family being together, so it's not that big of a deal for me. It's always been the norm. So I grew up in Hawaii. I grew up on the island of Maui, which is a beautiful island. And then at about the age of 14, I decided to leave, and I moved to Europe and spent about 10 years kind of spread out between France, Greece, the UK. So that was definitely a good experience, at least to me. And it really opened my eyes and gave me, good perspective. I relearned French the second time around because I lost the language. Having grown up in Hawaii, I ended up, I would say, English is my first language, definitely. And I feel more mentally American than anything. Moving forward, after the 10-year hiatus, 10 really was not really a hiatus. After the 10-year stunt in Europe, I came back to visit my mother because I figured, I hadn't seen her in 10 years. I had not once flew over to visit, didn't spend any vacation, nothing. I was just gone. 10 years in Europe, just fuck this shit, I'm out.
What year did you move back? What year would that have been?
That would have been probably late 2015, I believe.
Okay.
In December of 2015, I moved back.
Okay.
And so she asked me to stay a year. I said if I could find a job in a place, no worries. I'd go ahead and give it a try. I managed to find work, a good company, and I was able to sort of move up a little bit in the ranks as far as it goes. Hospitality industry, I'll say that much. My own place, of course, was a necessity. And so I really got comfortable probably in August of 2016, having moved back here. They say if you can't make it 2 years to be sustainable and comfortable here in Hawaii, you don't belong here. Anyways, that's what they say. Shit can be pretty expensive. A good rule of thumb or a good way to sort of represent it, I tell people is beer is cheaper than milk here. Milk is $8 a gallon.
God.
Yeah, so that's
hilarious.
one. I mean, who doesn't? Well, I mean, there are people that don't drink milk, but most people know roughly what the price of milk would be. Even if they don't drink it. I guess gasoline would be a good comparison, but I don't drive. I don't have a license. I don't drive. I'm pretty central, so I live close to work and to anywhere I might need to go to pick up, necessities for life.
Is it true that people that aren't natives in Hawaii kind of get treated differently?
Yeah, definitely. There's definitely a resistance to non-locals, 100%. But I think that's true everywhere. It's sort of like a pseudo-tribalism, if you will, non-locals will never be really accepted because the locals felt like they were cheated out of, land and other means of value, sort of but that's, once again, that's true. I've experienced that in every country I've been in. There's always a resistance to outsiders, no matter where you go. Even in Hawaii, though, people are pretty friendly here, and there's this Hawaiian hospitality thing, or it's really Polynesian. I would say Tahiti even has it more so, where it's oh, like, oh, you drink beer? Yeah, okay, come to my house. I make you dinner, sort of thing.
That's
And where
awesome.
like it's a complete stranger and they just invite you into their house and you meet their whole family. Like their 12 brothers and sisters, their 4 aunts and uncles, and mom and dad and grandpa and grandma, and then maybe even great grandpa and grandma. But
Wow. Very family centered.
right. But that's more so Tahiti. Like Hawaii has that too, but it's also different, and it does vary slightly from island to island. The most populated island is going to be a little more urban, like a more like city people. Like it's more densely populated. People don't have they seem to convince themselves that they don't have a lot of time, so there's a bit more of a like coldness, I guess, or like distrust. Yeah,
Yeah.
there's more of like it's not as much of that warm. Well, the word for it in Hawaiian is ohana, like which means family, and
Mm.
like people. There's a term for like adopted family, which is hanai. Your hanai family or your hanai ohana is like your adoptive family, and that does happen when you're like really close with people and you end up like spending a lot of time with them. You sort of become, I don't want to say indoctrinated, but you sort of just become accepted. And then of course there are people who come from the mainland who really have open eyes and they're interested in the culture, and it feels like they want to integrate more. And it comes to different people differently too, and it also depends on who they surround themselves with. But there are instances where people can become very localized very quickly as well. Probably if they share some kind of interest culturally, like whether it's surfing or cooking, or because like
Mm.
Hawaiian food is a big thing, but like for the most part, a lot of cuisine Hawaiian is fusion. So it might be like Hawaiian Japanese fusion, Hawaiian Thai
Sure.
fusion, Hawaiian, whatever fusion. It's there's a lot of Asian influence, obviously.
Hmm.
So like some of the big hitters in Hawaii were brought here during like the plantation days, brought here for work. So they're like pseudo local as it is, which would be like the Japanese, the Portuguese, the Chinese, the Filipino. Like you're gonna have these communities here like in mass, and they're basically considered local.
And you've mentioned before that you're kind of seen as a white man.
My skin color is white. Yeah,
Of
my skin
course.
color is white. But then
Yeah.
people, if they don't go as far to know my name, then they're just gonna see me as a white guy. Even though, I mean, like, I guess if you would see me, I don't look classically Caucasian. I'm not like blonde. I'm not like I am freckled actually. Like I have freckles.
Hmm.
But it's not like I'm freckled like on my shoulders and stuff. Um, I'm not like a ginger, you know.
But
um,
you have some Japanese heritage.
yeah, I do. So like darker hair, darker kind of maybe not thicker hair, but it is kind of dense. And then I guess I don't. I guess some of my features are a little more Asian, but you wouldn't really like pick. You wouldn't really be able to pick up on that off the
Hmm.
cuff because like I am. I think majority of my heritage is European.
Okay. So do you feel like a local now, having lived
No,
there? You don't
no,
feel like a local? No.
I don't. I've never felt like a local here. I've never felt actually accepted. I've always felt like I'm just a white.
Hmm.
Like I mean, like I've had local friends for like the longest time growing up here, and like I would, I guess technically, like if someone asks me for the background and stuff, I guess I am technically, local because I grew up here. I came out here when I was 2.5. And where did I come here from? The mainland? No, I came here from Tahiti. Where did the Polynesians migrate here from? Sort of thing. If you want to go down that line, it's almost like saying, oh, you have more of a claim to being
Yeah.
sort of pseudo local if you wanted to. There's I mean, obviously, we've all heard and sort of like reiterated the whole concept of memory and how every time you recall a memory, you're sort of recreating the last time you recalled that memory.
Right.
So it's like the validity of it kind of loses it loses its validity every time you recall it in a sense.
Yeah.
But yeah, but I mean, I still feel the other thing I wanted to mention was there's this sort of like time dilation that takes place when you're in a high stress situation. At least for me, it's always been that way. I've had an experience where I was at a party. I was probably 16, 17. I was at a party drinking with friends, And at some point, after a few drinks, there was a pool the pool was open, right? It was someone's house. It was late at night though, and we were out at the pool house. That's where we were partying. And someone goes, "Oh, can you swim to the other side on a full breath?" And I said, "Yeah, of course." So I took my shirt off and took my pants off, and I was there in my boxer shorts, and I just jumped in on one breath to swim to the other side. And there's a connection here. While I was swimming to the other side, the girl came out saying that we were making too much noise and her parents were going to be pissed. And she started closing the automatic hard cover, like a hard plastic cover. And so when I hit to the other side and I went to come up, I hit that hard cover, and your adrenaline hits. It's like someone shoves a needle into your chest. And when that happens to me, everything slows down to at least that's the way it feels. And suddenly it's a question of all these scenarios that run through your head. It's not so much in it when it's high stress and it's time is of the essence. It's not so much for me, oh, did I live a good life or anything like that. It's how do I get out of this situation? How do I get air? How do I breathe? How do I survive, right? And so it's like in that scenario, I hit that plastic thing and I immediately knew, okay, my options are use all the force I have to try to break this plastic thing and potentially fail at that, not break through it and drown, or alternatively break through it and survive, but then have to deal with the consequences of breaking this thing, which isn't so bad when you weigh it against you being alive, or needing to be resuscitated versus, okay, I'm going to try and swim to the other side. Now you have a success and a failure, right? A scenario or outcome to that decision. You try to swim back and you beat it closing and you make it out and you survive, you breathe, you get air. Or you try to swim back and you waste your energy trying to swim back and, maybe you drown and you have to be resuscitated. Whereas you could have used that energy to try to break through the hardcover, essentially. All of these sort of scenarios, it's like all of a sudden someone lays the plans out for you. You are laying the plans out for yourself, but it's like all of a sudden you see everything as it's like a forking road, and every decision has a path and a percentage for success and a percentage for failure. You might not calculate it as a percentage, but it seems to, for me at least in those kinds of scenarios, it seems like suddenly your options are very clear. And all of this happens instantaneously. It happens like in a second or in a couple seconds. You're literally on the wire because you've already, in my situation, I was out of breath. I was ready to come up and breathe,
Yeah.
Finally, I decided to kick against the wall as hard as I could and try to swim back and beat the thing. And I came out a little more than halfway across, I would say maybe 60-75% of the way back. I had to swim back to come out, and that was all in one breath. So I felt triumphant breaking the water. I felt triumphant, and I just kind of screamed like, yeah.
What happened to everybody else?
They were all like, yeah, like you did it. But it was kind of like all of a sudden it was no longer a question of the danger of drowning. It was more so like, holy shit, you did the length of the pool. It was not an Olympic pool. It was like
Right.
a fairly sized pool. I don't even know the dimensions off the top of my head.
Right.
And I was under the influence. But it was a decent sized personal pool. It wasn't like a kiddie pool, like there was a deeper end and a shallow end. And I swam from the shallow end to the deep end. It was easily I would say 10 foot or more. I would put it between probably 10-15 foot range.
Yeah.
Which is very, very far, but on one breath and under the influence, it was a stupid idea, and I never imagined that someone would try to close the automatic hardcover on me.
Why? Yeah. Why would you ever think
He was
that?
basically saying stop making noise, get out of the pool, and hadn't realized that I was already in the water halfway across the pool when she started closing it.
Jesus Christ. So you went into your sort of base instincts at that point.
Mm-hmm. I guess you could say that, yeah. And so that sort of relays back to, that's exactly what I'm saying, is there's this sort of time dilation that happens where all of a sudden a very short amount of time can seem like a long amount of time. Like time is relative anyways. It's all about perception, right? And it feels to me, because I've been in several either physically life-threatening situations or psychologically life-threatening situations. And in those scenarios, it seems like that adrenaline rush causes a sort of time dilation in which you're able to very quickly hypothesize what potential options you have and how they might play out.
It's the fight or flight thing, man.
Yeah, it really is. It really, really is. And the thing is, every time you have a success outcome, it does feel it's like a very satisfying feeling because you are alive, which sounds
Yeah.
stupid to have to say, right? But even if your life wasn't really at risk, like of course you can evaluate it differently. You could say like, oh, you survived, so your life wasn't really at risk. But that's like okay, so the ends, versus the means sort of thing. Um,
You've heard people say the thing like, I've never felt more alive than in this moment.
right, right. It's weird though, because like I've always enjoyed like a good adrenaline rush, but it's not like I wouldn't call myself an adrenaline junkie where like I seek that out and I put myself in these dangerous situations. Even though I do find it enjoyable, it's definitely stimulating without a doubt. I feel like the more physically daunting experiences are actually easier to cope with from my personal experience. It's easier to sort of just go, okay, I was presented with the situation and I overcame the situation, and that's because I was, physically able to overcome the situation. Whereas the psychological experience is it sticks with you a little more,
Okay.
it's a little harder to just kind of label it and put it in a drawer, close that drawer and be done with it. I feel like the psychological experience kind of lingers a little more.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Do you think that, like, with the physical trauma that you've experienced, you kind of build up calluses or you build up some sort of tolerance for it, but with a psychological scar, it's a scar and it really doesn't heal?
Well, I mean, I guess it's different as well because at the same time, the way the brain works and like through pattern recognition, potentially having experienced the psychological side, you might not have a physical callus for it, but being put in another, high stress situation, you may just be able to cope with it better because your brain can then go back to a similar situation, maybe not similar in the sense
Right.
of what's on the table, but similar in the sense of okay, you've now got 5 seconds to come up with a plan and to execute that plan.
Yeah. You've created those pathways in your brain, and then when something familiar happens, you kind of snap back to that memory of it.
Right. Or if not the memory, at least the process of going through that information.
And you can't really control that. It just happens. There's
Yeah.
things that it's like the idea of like deja vu or something.
Mhm,
Like
mhm, mhm.
you're not sure where the memory came from, but you remember something happened in your life that's familiar. Whether
Yeah.
if it's like seeing something, hearing something, smelling something, all of your senses.
It does make me wonder a little bit because as you may know, I haven't I haven't told this story on the podcast before. I've had a run-in with, like, psychedelics even at a very young age, and it makes me wonder about how that affected thought process and,
Sure.
sort of dealing with stressful situations because I would consider that a near death experience because I was very young at the time and it did put me in the hospital. I was technically in a pseudo coma because of it. But it's like there have been studies showing that it can affect like language uptake and stuff like that, as well as like introducing new pathways that sort of can pseudo assist with the whole learning process, etc. So it is a curiosity to me. It makes me wonder if oh, is this a handicap that I've had this experience, or is this, a foot forward sort of thing? But I don't know, and I've never had a brain scan, so I can't, you know,
It's really hard to say, but
it's
it does
really hard
make
to
you wonder for sure.
definitely makes you wonder.
Let's go into the heart of this story.
Mhm.
So this story begins on Saturday, January 13th, 2018. Shortly after 8 a.m. local time in Hawaii, you receive this alert, which presumably goes out to all 1.4 million residents on their TV, radio, and smartphone, as well as a tweet from the Hawaii Emergency Services account. Walk me through this time from the moment you got the alert.
Okay, so I work on Saturdays, in the evening. So I got home from my shift ended at around 7, and I got home probably around 7:30. So I got home and I got on the computer to talk to my significant other, right? Where I got into TeamSpeak. and settled in after work around 7:30. So we get talking, and it's about 30 minutes later when my phone goes off. So I've been up all night, and I'm just getting a bit of a breather and just kind of getting comfortable to just have a little conversation before going to bed and then going back to work the following evening. So we're just talking. I can't even tell you what we were talking about. I don't remember. But what I do remember is getting this message, this alert. Yeah, I hear the sound, and in my mind, my go-to assumption is, oh, flash floods. Oh, we're gonna have a lot of rain because that happens all the time here in Hawaii. It's the tropics. I'm like, oh, my phone's going off. I guess we're gonna have a lot of rain. It's probably flash floods. So as I'm saying this, I'm grabbing my phone to look at it, and I'm just kind of struck by this message saying, ballistic missile inbound. This is not a drill.
And how did it sound? Did it sound the same as other alerts? Kind of that like sort of pseudo siren sound or something?
Yeah, that's what it sounded like. Yeah.
Okay. It was like a window that popped up on your phone, right? And then
Right.
it had the message printed on there?
Yeah, like a, triangle, red, exclamation mark, alert. We will get alerts like that if there is potential for flash flooding. It happens quite often, actually. I guess I kind of stammered and as I read the message out loud, and then I said, I gotta go. So I didn't know what to do. I couldn't just stay there. What is I just gonna sit there and be blown up, be just fucking erased off the face of the earth, sitting there on my at my computer? I was like, I gotta go. And the response came through, okay. Like they didn't know what to say either. I think she was just as dumbstruck as I was. So I just grabbed my backpack. I think I had a liter of water or like a 1.5 liter bottle of water. Grabbed that, threw that in the backpack, and just ran out of the house thinking, shit, can I get a cab and just tell him to go as far to the like mountain as possible, or like try to get out of what was running through my mind is I want to get out of the most densely central populated part of the island, even though that makes
Right.
no sense, right? But I thought, fuck it, I need to get the fuck as far away as possible from, because I live pretty centrally to this particular island.
Yeah.
In a pretty densely populated area.
In an apartment or house?
In an apartment.
Okay.
Like this apartment is, I think it was constructed probably in the 70s. The walls are pretty thin. This apartment's not gonna fucking hold up at all. It's gonna be demolished. I was just like, I need to get out of here. So I ran downstairs. As I'm running downstairs, with my backpack with nothing but a bottle of water in it and like a credit card or something, and my phone, I'm thinking, can I get a taxi? I'm like trying to dial a taxi number. Of course, that's not answering. I get downstairs and it's like this. It's around 8 o'clock, and it's like it's just eerily calm. Like I remember the sunbeams coming through, and there was sort of like this like fog. It wasn't really fog, but it was sort of like, I guess, sort of a morning dew sort of thing going on. You could see all the rays of the. It was actually a really nice day, beautiful day, and it seemed so juxtaposed versus like what I was going on internally. Well, I'm about to be blown to smithereens. I'm just about to be just completely eviscerated by some kind of ballistic missile, right? And like, I guess the cars were just driving by maybe a little bit faster than usual. There wasn't a lot of traffic at that particular moment, but I kind of just looked around, kind of wondering or hoping to get an answer from somewhere, but not really getting one. So I kind of just took off running, guess what would be west.
You took off on foot because you don't have a license. You don't
Yeah,
have a
I
vehicle.
took off on foot. I took
Yeah.
off on foot looking for a potential shelter, something that I could hole up in as a potential shelter that had thicker walls than my apartment. I ran down the street close towards where the mall is. There was a Walgreens on one side and a Target on the other side. And the Walgreens is like all glass and the Target's like thick concrete. So in my mind, I'm like, fuck, I'm gonna go into this Target, which is actually pretty ironic, like hiding from a missile, ballistic missile in a Target, right?
The big bullseye on the front.
Big bullseye on the front. Yeah, I'm over here. Hit this building, sort of thing. But that's not what was going through my mind. Well, the only thing that was going through my mind was like the structural integrity of the building I chose. And the Target had big, thick concrete walls. And I saw some people going towards the Walgreens, and I kind of just loudly shouted, like out loud, I said, they say you should stay away from windows. And I'm not sure where I got that. It might have been from the girl I was talking to, because I think I did call her back as I'm trying to like fumble through and figure out what's going on. And I saw one guy like in khakis and like a olive dress shirt or something like that on the phone speaking frantically to someone, wondering like, what is he going to do? And then there was like an African American lady who's on the phone. Everyone seemed to be on the phone and trying to fucking figure out what was going on. So, but I kind of like ushered people towards the Target, which sounds so bad. now going back to it, like just in retrospect, yeah, come into this Target here. But it just seemed to make sense. And the lady on the phone said, my husband is military. He's saying it's real. This isn't a drill. They don't have any more information. So we kind of like shuffled into this Target and went upstairs. At some point, I decided I'd call my mom and figure out what she was doing and, say, yeah, I love you, sort of thing. Be safe, whatever it is you plan on doing. She said they're just going to stay at their house. And I said, okay. And then I hung up because really that was just a moment of saying goodbye, like crossing all the T's and dotting all the I's. I guess it's sort of everything is a bit futile at the end of the day. But I guess I felt sort of responsible to at least do that because I thought to myself, what if we all survived? Then it would be kind of awkward to go, oh, you didn't even call me. So I felt more obligated to do it. But I just went through the steps of it and then hung up and then called my significant other again. She was on Twitter trying to figure stuff out. And I tweeted out one thing finally because I realized that there were a lot of people that I knew. It's kind of sad actually looking back on it, but like I felt like I wanted to leave the world with at least a goodbye. So I tweeted out, shit just hit the fan. If this is it, then I just want you all to know that I love you very much and goodbye, sort of thing, And that was it. And and that's what I tweeted out. And then as I walked to the center of the Target, I kind of took charge and started saying out loud to no one in particular, does this building have a basement? And if so, how do we get there? And then someone who was sitting down on the floor kind of sprung up and went, yo, this guy's surviving. I'm with him. And I was just like, well, you're an idiot for putting your life in my hands, sort of thing. Because I don't know what the fuck I'm doing. It's just I want to be as barricaded as possible, away from windows.
Yeah, you wanted to give yourself the best chance to survive if you were going to survive, which we actually had no idea in that moment.
No, and it really what it really showed us is that we were completely unprepared. Everyone was completely unprepared. I saw videos of people like putting children down in manholes and stuff like that, like down in sewers and stuff like that. And what a lot of people did was just try to garner more information, like figure out, is this actually happening? Because the time frame from the moment that the alert goes out to the moment that there's an impact is about 20 minutes. That's the kind of window we have. And so time was ticking, and looking at the minutes count up to 20 was kind of terrifying. But I kind of internalized thoughts were, did you have a fulfilling life? Did you? And I thought to myself, I had a pretty interesting life. I grew up in the tropics, and I moved out to Europe, and I spent 10 years in Europe, and I went to all these crazy parties, and I met all these crazy people, and for the most part, I had fun. And it would be a story that would be potentially worth telling. And if I don't get to tell it, that's too bad, but at least I experienced it, and in that I found some solace. In that I kind of thought, it's okay. I didn't just waste the time away. And that was kind of a good feeling to kind of come to terms with it. But what I was really doing and thinking of these things was I was preparing to die. I was preparing to die, and I was trying to come to terms with it. And I think that I did in those moments come to terms with it, and I was kind of okay. It was interesting because there was some kind of hope there, and that hope was kind of pulling in an opposite direction from that tranquility, in a sense, because that hope was saying maybe you won't die. And that kind of added a level of fear, I guess, in a weird way. Not a fear of life, but just it detracted from that thought of, if I'm going to die, I'm committed to this, then I have to, in order to be okay with it, I need to be committed to it. And the hope that was saying maybe this was a mistake, or maybe the explosion will go off and things will be reduced to rubble, but maybe somehow you will be alive, and then it would just be a matter of taking it step by step and refusing to die, sort of clawing and gnawing your way to survive through whatever is left. But that train of thought, the hope, was contradictory to giving in and saying, okay, this is it. So that was a very polarizing moment in itself. And coming to that realization was kind of polarizing. It was kind of weird to have death on one side feel so peaceful and to be okay with it, and to have life on the other side and hope be pulling away from that. So that was kind of strange. So these were the internalized thoughts. For the record, there was no basement.
Of course.
I was told by the employees that there's no basement. They gave kind of a few suggestions for another building that might have a basement, but that building already had its metal shutter closed, so there was no means of
Entry.
ability
So
or
what
whatever.
was it like with you? Like, how many people were around you?
Probably between 10 and 15 people
Okay.
in that particular building at that moment.
That was it,
But
huh?
yeah, it was, I mean, people were either with their loved ones or they didn't have the time to get to their loved ones. If you weren't with your loved ones, I guess you were just trying to find the most structurally sound building, and that seemed to be a structurally sound building, so there was upwards of 10 people. At the same time, it was just so surreal to be in that scenario and to sort of take charge in a sense. That also was sort of a positive experience because it was strange how nobody seemed to be rising to the moment. Nobody seemed to be asking the questions that needed to be asked, like how do we improve our chance of survival. Nobody was asking anything. Nobody was trying to figure out like what would be the best next step.
Was it surprising to you that you were the one who stepped up, or do you feel like you did it just because nobody else would?
I feel like being shy or like being afraid of doing the wrong thing melts away really fast. And although I may in certain situations be a little bit more timid or whatever, when when it matters, none of that shit it goes away. I think underneath all of that there is a sort of trait in myself where I'm not afraid to potentially make a mistake and put myself on the line for that sort of thing.
Right.
Based on that, I've been put in leadership roles in the past, whether or not it was of my own accord or whether it was a role that I was forced into, sort of thing.
This is completely different, though, man. This is
Yeah,
a
yeah,
high stress situation. You don't have any sort of warning. You get this, you just get this
it
alert on
didn't.
your phone, and
Yeah,
everyone's confirming that this is real. This
right.
is real, and everyone
It,
is just left to their own devices.
it didn't mean anything to me. At the end of the day, I didn't care that if someone would paint me as some wannabe leader or like whatever. That didn't matter to me. Well, all that mattered to me was I had a question I wanted an answer. Where does this building have a basement, and how do I get there if it does? And if not, I didn't really have much more to ask, or many other ways to prepare given my environment and given the time frame. It was very the time like and I'm sure that other people may have had thoughts like that, but just kind of surrendered to the idea that there's not enough time. And so maybe that's why they didn't ask. Even if someone told me, there is a basement, but you have to go like around the corner to try to get there, sort of thing. Like maybe I would try. Maybe someone else wouldn't try, sort of thing. But I wanted to do and know that I had done my best to increase my chances of survival, regardless. Because I guess at the end of the day, when you're presented with information like that, um, you either have to choose to fight or surrender. And I decided that I didn't want to be, even though I was okay, and I came to terms with death, that I didn't want to be someone who just surrendered. I wanted to fight, and I guess that does say something about me. I do like a good fight.
Yeah.
Yeah, I felt like if I was looking at the scenario from the third person, I wouldn't want to see myself not fighting. And so you take it for what it is. You take it as reality, and that is your reality in those moments. So it is very much the reality we all lived for those 28 minutes or so before we received follow-up
Right.
confirmation that it wasn't true. Because every minute after the 20-minute mark was an eternity, I tell you, because it was supposed to be that any minute then we would get there would be the actual impact from that ballistic missile.
You have this sort of 20-minute window that you have in mind, and then you say every minute after was like an eternity. Did you feel like this hope and tranquility struggle that was happening internally? Did you feel that sort of stretching or bending in any way during those final minutes before it was sort of like the all clear?
Yeah, definitely. Because even though there's a 20-minute window, I mean, these are estimates, right? The hypothesized attack was coming from Korea because we are in range.
Yeah.
But then on the other hand, we don't know we know to a degree how sophisticated their delivery systems and payloads are. Once again, it's not
It's all theoretical.
right. We know that in recent times they have done testing, right?
Yep.
So all of those just played into the
Anxiety.
yeah, they were all factors that played towards the anxiety or towards the potential validity of this scenario. It did not seem blatantly false. And I feel like if you just were the type of person to say like, oh yeah, like that's bullshit, and then like it's almost like a movie trope, right? Like, oh yeah, whatever, man, that's bullshit. And then boom, and that motherfucker dies because they were just like, yeah, no way, man, totally, we're America, like just it just seemed really arrogant and ignorant in a way, and I don't feel like that is um that's not me,
You even kind of got confirmation from outside of the store before you went in. You overheard a
right.
conversation from that African American lady talking to
Yeah,
her
because
husband.
I heard her talking, and it sounded like I don't even know how. There were essentially two moments where I kind of like took control and like altered certain course of events or decisions for other people. One was, telling people heading towards the Walgreens like that's probably not a good idea, and then the other was asking out loud about the basement
Hmm.
situation. But yeah, the lady who was on the phone, I thought I heard her. It sounded like she was asking someone who would have more information. I guess I asked her. I kind I it's everything just seemed to happen. Everything just happened so fluidly. It was like if you had to ask a question to someone, they would just give you the answer right away if it was relevant, right? It wasn't a matter of, oh, I don't know you, I'm not going to talk to you. None of that shit mattered. All of a sudden, every communication was just instantaneous between. She just told me, my husband's in the military. They're saying this. And I went, oh my God, sort of thing. It was kind of funny wrapping it all up, leaving from it. I also kind of like tried to bring ease to the situation by saying, like, well, like it was a pleasure taking shelter with you all. Like, have a nice day, sort of thing.
Oh
Um,
man.
but it was just like I don't know, because I am a bit of a joker in a way. I've been in like an elevator that like nearly it like kind of jumped a bit and then almost got stuck. Like it got kind of stuck and then continued moving finally. And
It was enough of a jolt that you had to question, like, is this happening, kind of
it
deal?
well, no, it jolted and then it stopped completely for
Okay.
like a couple minutes and then
A
started
couple
moving.
minutes.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
And
Jesus
and so like
Christ.
and I was in the elevator with two women and both of them looked at me. I
What
mean,
are you gonna do?
right, what am I gonna do? But they both looked at me and I just kind of smiled and said, I'm sure it's nothing,
Oh fuck, man.
Like I would it's so like stereotypical, but it's like when people look to you for comfort, do you look at them back and just go, yeah, we're fucked, or like, which could be kind of funny in a way, but it's like I don't life is and isn't comedy, so in a way they kind of look at me and I'm just kind of like shit, I have to be the anchor here. I have to be suddenly these two people are looking to me for comfort, and
Yeah.
it would be unethical for me to not comply with that sudden request for comfort,
I just got like goosebumps. I got like a little tingly feeling because I'm thinking about my own life and the moment where I realized that I'd become a man and it didn't
Mhm,
happen. Like I felt like I was a real man, like a man with responsibilities, people that like really depended on me.
mhm,
And it was after my dad had passed, and this was probably like four months afterwards. And my dad had been cremated, and we had the funeral and all of that. And this was the family reunion that happened in August. My dad had passed in March, and we planted a whole row of trees at the farm. And for every member of the family, everyone got their own tree, right? I called mine. Mine was next to my dad's. Okay.
yeah,
And I had my dad's ashes in my car, just in this box. And it was a chaotic scene because we got like 30 people from the family and friends, and everybody is all over the place having fun, drinking beer. It's not a somber time. This is a celebration. Everyone's together and enjoying each other's company. But we
mhm,
had this time set aside that all of my dad's kids, me and my sisters. I have three sisters, and we were going to sort of have this little ceremony where we buried some of my dad's ashes at the base of the tree, and we were going to say a few words. Okay.
okay,
And there was the moment, it was just so trivial. It was like, okay, I'm going to go get my dad's ashes from the car, and then I'm going to come back, and everybody's waiting for me. And I got to the car, and I went to get the ashes, and I sat down, and I just started crying uncontrollably because everybody was looking at me. And that was the moment that I was like, okay, I'm a man now, and all of this really matters. like
Right.
like I never
It
had
hit
that
you hard.
time. I never had that time where people counted on me, you know? It
Right.
was I
You
was just
found
kind
yourself
of
in the moment.
I took care of myself. I didn't even feel like I did a great job at that, you know? I
Mhm.
felt like I was kind of a fuck up. I felt like, my dad and I had a good relationship, but was he proud of me? I don't know.
Mhm.
But in that moment I'm like, I think my dad would be proud how I handled this, but I had this sort of doubt that was like, can I do this? I was like, I don't know if I can do this. And I felt really alone at that time.
Mm.
But then I just got up and I looked and I saw everyone standing there. I'm like, well, this is my purpose. There it is. Everybody, all there. There's my
Lined up.
purpose for life. Everybody there. We're all together, and this is the moment where I step forward with a purpose, and the past doesn't matter anymore. Okay.
Right.
Now, this is a very long setup for my question to you. Was any of your situation that happened there or prior, was there like a moment like this is a turning point for me, and this is going to change, like this is going to like change my life from here on in and how I handle situations?
For the first thing, it was not the first sort of pseudo near death experience I had. It
Right.
was just a more psychologically charged of them.
Hmm.
Um, it put a question mark in my mind more so than sort of like a pedestal to step up to. It put more so of a question for me, at least this particular situation, because the long and the shorthand of it was I had no choice but to come to terms with potentially dying at that point. In the other near death experiences I've had, it wasn't something that I had to consciously address, that I had to consciously go, okay, this is probably it. But they had been near death experiences regardless. This particular experience, I did sort of come to terms with it. And so that kind of put a question mark in my mind of, so what does that mean then? If I'm ready to go, if I've come to terms with it and I'm okay with it, then well, then why what am I struggling against? What am
Mm,
I fighting for finally? But that, once again, it was like it's two horses pulling in opposite directions, if you know what I mean, because on the one side I did decide to fight, sort of pseudo fight to survive. I didn't decide to just lie over and die. But I was more or less forced to say I'm okay with it. So it
mm,
kind of created this ambivalent sense of I'm okay with dying, but I don't really want to die, but I'm okay with it if I do. Um, and I guess emotionally and psychologically that kind of pulls apart at you. I feel like when you have to rise to an occasion and people are depending on you in a way that they're looking towards you, that's kind of going to put you into a position to want to rise to the occasion.
right. You're
Um,
not feeling of self like this sort of I don't know what the word is, but like pity, or like I can't believe this is happening to me. This, or you, like you said, like the fear of dying type of thing. Like you didn't really have time for that
right.
because you were looking at the people that were in your field of view, the people that were in your immediate vicinity, and you were saying, like thinking about them and as a whole rather.
Yeah, the other thing was I was surrounded by people I didn't know. So there was kind of that there was definitely, and I wasn't actually gonna say anything about it, but it is true that I there was a bit of sadness that I had to sort of push away or bury in a way that I was ultimately alone. I was surrounded by people, but I was ultimately alone. And so I was a little bit struck by that as well.
Was it you were struck by the fact that like, okay, well, all these people are here, but if I'm going to die, doesn't matter that all these people are around if I'm just going to die? Is that
Right.
is that
I
fair?
guess. I guess you could phrase it that way, but it was just any of the nagging, complaining, or anything that would be sadness or anything that could affect my logical processing of the information was immediately cut out and buried and put away, pushed to the side. Because when you're in a high stress situation like that, all those things are hindrances.
Right.
They distract. I guess in some ways there's like I am human. I am human. am emotional, I have feelings, but there's always been sort of this imprinting on me that men should be stoic, and like if you're really logically oriented, then you distance yourself from being emotionally oriented, right? What is it, Plato? Was it Plato or Socrates that said, logic and emotion are horses pulling in two different directions,
Mm.
and that kind of resonates with the whole feeling of being okay with dying and versus having hope to survive and fighting to survive are two horses pulling in different directions as well. But there are certain things that contradict with each other, and so that's kind of tough to deal with. I think that in a way, maybe I sacrifice a little bit of the emotional aspect of myself, and even in that scenario, and even now thinking back, that I am kind of selfish in that way that I want things to work out, and sometimes you sacrifice some of what makes you the most human.
Mm.
And you may paint it however you want to. You may paint it as heroic, or you may paint it as being very logically oriented, or being very manly, or however you want to spin it, But at the end of the day, I am somewhat of a humanist. Like I want people to be able to rely on themselves and to rely on each other rather than to rely on some kind of like hypothetical, theoretical thing, like I don't really want to make this about like politics or religion, but like I would prefer it if people had a means of looking to themselves and looking to the people that they surround themselves with in times of hardship, because people are real, despite all of their shortcomings or all of their achievements, they're real and they're there and they can make a difference. And I feel like that's where there is true value, not in some idea, you know, not
Yeah.
in some. But then on the other hand, I know that there are gaps to fill for a lot of people, and so in that sense, I think as a tool, these theoretical representations or otherwise ideas are good because they allow the filling of those gaps when people don't know where to look or who to rely on. If they can't rely on themselves or they can't rely on the people around them, they can look towards some theological idea to rely on. But I just feel like personally that's a waste of time. And I guess there is a certain weight or certain gravitas to that, because it really is taking responsibility for a lot. I feel like that's really the way forward is is to be rooted in reality, which
Mm.
is interesting in contrast to this whole experience, because while it was reality for all of us, it was not in fact real. It was a mistake.
Of course.
It was an experience.
It, w-
It was an experience based on a
definitely was an experience. Okay. Now, at some point, you got some sort of message, or you got some
28
sort of
minutes later.
28 minutes later. How did you get the all clear signal? Like, how did that get to you?
So I would say probably between 20 and 24 minutes. We'll call the halfway mark to the 28-minute official thing. I was informed, my significant other, she said, like there is a tweet that went out that's saying that this is not in fact a legitimate threat. Like it's not in
Right.
fact a ballistic missile that is in
The
that
the the
is
tweet
physically
from
coming.
the tweet from the Hawaii Emergency Agency went out saying no threat, and that went
Right.
out approximately, I don't even know. I mean, according to the timeline that I read on CNN, it was somewhere around 15 minutes later, right?
Right. But I was like skeptical about that as well, because that also raises the question of, okay, if we can't believe the previous message that says not a drill, then how can we believe this message now that's saying that it isn't essentially a
Yeah,
drill? Or it raises a bunch of question marks. I needed to know for sure, and and Twitter isn't the most reliable source, even if it's coming
of
from a
course.
vetted account.
Yeah, you got this message from them at about 8:06, and then at about 8:20 in so many seconds you get a message from the same people saying no threat. So it's like, yeah, how could you believe them one way or another?
I was less skeptical when we got the official message at 28 minutes through
Right.
the same a similar, or if not the same
Yeah.
system. The whole thing was that there wasn't a system in place to recall or to send out
Yeah.
another message at that point.
Yeah, did you know that the governor could not log into that Twitter account in order to tweet and say there is no threat?
No, I didn't
Yeah,
know.
apparently he was trying to figure out the login information to log into Twitter so he could tweet from that account, but he could not log in. And now this is in between trying to coordinate with all these agencies to try to figure out, is this credible? What's going on? It just seemed like it was this convoluted system of bureaucracy that like
Right.
wasn't necessary, and that they didn't have a system to
No,
rescind
they
this threat
they didn't.
notification.
They absolutely didn't. It's like having a one-way message, where they could just say they just push a button and it says this one thing, but they don't have any kind of interface to say anything else. So it's just like, all right, push the red button in case of emergency, and that message goes out. But what if that was a mistake? What if someone sat on the button? Well, we don't have any other buttons. That's the only one,
Oh
like
wow.
essentially they didn't have a means of sending out another message. So I guess they kind of ghetto rigged that follow-up message at 28 minutes, which isn't 28 minutes is pretty good for figuring that shit out. But at the same time, it's not fast enough. I mean, if it was a missile inbound, they were 8 minutes late.
Yeah.
So I think,
I mean,
not that that matters. If
it
it
was
was inbound, it
chaos.
wouldn't matter.
How do you feel like you would have handled it differently maybe next time?
Well, ultimately, we're fucked. We're kind of fucked here. I would need to get out of the zone. I would need to get, and this isn't why I've considered moving either. Not at all. Essentially, if you live here and there's a ballistic missile inbound, unless we have bomb shelters by that time, we're fucked. We're essentially fucked. You might as well go down to the beach, roll up a fat spliff, and light that bitch because you're fucked. Essentially.
Yeah, isn't there people
Um,
that said that's what they would have done?
yeah, there is. There definitely is. But yeah, it's very much Star Wars Rogue One, where they go out to the beach and the fucking whole planet is
Yeah.
essentially a giant wave coming in to just obliterate them. You're fucked. You're just fucked. So looking back on it, knowing what I know now, all of that fight or flight and choosing mostly the fight path was pretty futile. I mean, I might as well have done the other, and just which is weird because that's not my instinct. My instinct is to not just turn the cheek and die. But it seems like moving forward that's all you really can do if you're in this particular place.
Hmm. I think for some people, being in a situation like that,
Mhm.
it's such a shock because they're kind of they're going forward kind of numb in their lives, right?
Right.
They're
Right.
kind of just sleepwalking through everything. And all of a sudden they wake up and it's ending and they're like, well, wait a minute. I didn't even get to do anything in my life. And for you, it seems like it's kind of the opposite. You've been present this whole time. You've had like a lifetime of experiences, and you're still very young.
Right.
You're kind of you're a globetrotter. You've been around and back again to where you spent some of your childhood. So now
Right.
you're kind of at peace in a lot of ways. Do you feel?
Yeah, I think that's fair to say, definitely. Because like even that summary I gave you is omitting a lot because I've traveled to other places as well that I didn't mention in
Of
that whole
course.
sort of quick summary. So yeah, I've definitely got to experience a lot than what I would say a large portion of the general public may have got to experience. I mean, people think about traveling or dream about traveling to Europe or to Asia and stuff like that, and a lot of people never get around to it. Or if they do, they only end up going to one country. And I've been to several. And not only have I been there to visit, I've lived there. And it's not like I'm a military brat, where that's kind of just the way it has to be. But per chance, it just so happened that the opportunities presented themselves, and I took those opportunities, and I think that it was for the best for
Mm.
me. Just it's something that I can't take for granted. And looking at it from that perspective, it does make me more grateful. It makes me realize that it's at the end of the day, it's like how can you complain about things? So that's kind of like a double-edged blade, I guess, in some ways. But for the most part, it's positive. At the end of the day, I've done a lot of cool shit. So you know what I mean?
Yeah, man. No, I'm laughing because you're kind of enlightened in a way, more so than others, and that's what I love about you, man. Do you have any sort of messages for people that maybe would help them, not like logistically, but just like from like the mental or spiritual side, takeaways that you'd like to relay to people?
At the end of the day, when you're in a situation like that, a lot of the bullshit melts away. You realize that for the most part, we are all the same. We all have people that we care for, people that we don't care for, things that bother us, things that don't. A lot of people get caught up in all the nonsense, and it just adds to anxiety and stuff. But if you see the light of realizing that that's all like orchestrated yourself. You orchestrate that all of that anxiety yourself. Then in a way you can start to realize that you can focus on a lot of better things that are actually important. That's going to be different from one person to the next, but like everyone has that. Not every one person is exactly the same, but everyone has those things that bothers them or that doesn't bother them at all.
People have their ideals, things that bring them back to center. And that's what we would call, like, quote unquote, what's most important, right?
Right, exactly. At the end of the day, it's kind of this weird balance of not taking things too seriously, but taking the right things seriously. I'm not saying like, hey, life's a joke, have fun, you only live once, It's not one of those, but it's saying like, just come to terms with what's important to you and pursue those things, and don't worry so much about how other people are going to perceive that.
Right or wrong, right? Like, you're going to have to make mistakes in order to figure out.
It's inevitable.
What direction you're headed is going to be determined by effort and like just taking chances and like putting yourself out there, right?
Yeah, it's super cliche to say it, but just move your feet, just get going, because like whether or not people are like you're not doing good enough or you're not achieving what you should be achieving or whatever it may be, however they may try to cut you down, at least you're moving, at least you're getting something done. Whereas if you're caught in that situation where it comes down to the wire and you go, oh shit, I've been standing still this whole time because I'm afraid, then you realize that that's on you. You don't have anyone else to blame but yourself, because you're the one who's letting everyone else control you with that fear.
Yeah, man.
You just have to move your feet. You just got to get the ball rolling.
Yeah, man.
And who cares about the fuck ups? Because at the end of the day, they're not going to last. Nothing lasts. And what's set in stone? So just kind of, fuck all that bullshit and just go get what you want.
Yeah. Tick tock, tick tock. One of these days, you're going to look in the mirror and you're going to be like, this old motherfucker didn't do anything that they wanted to do that they thought of when they were, they didn't become what they wanted to be when they were a kid, did they? And like, well, that's kind of a stupid fallacy and dumb argument anyway, but did you try? Did you move your feet? Did you put forth any sort of effort?
It's better to choose what you regret rather than to regret that you never made the choice at all.
There you go. Perfect, dude. That's perfect. I think this is a great place to end.
Seems good.
So thank you very much, man. This was enlightening for me. I've heard this story in pieces before, but I'm so happy that I got to sit down with you and kind of go through the whole thing in great detail. It's something that I hope that I don't have to experience in my lifetime.
I would not wish it upon even my greatest enemies.
And people want to get in touch with you. How can they find you?
You can find me on Twitter at Herb_bug, or on Twitch at Herbbug, HERBBUG. Otherwise, if you want to shoot me an email, I mean, that's a whole another box of worms, but that's available as well. You can find it on my Twitter.
Excellent, man. Well, you were somebody that I've said in previous episodes, you were somebody who's given me a lot of support from the get-go, from the concept of this podcast. You were somebody that I've always wanted to have these conversations with. And I would dare say that you're one of my biggest inspirations to start it was from the first time that we met in Discord and had that conversation. So I thank you, man. I'm happy to call you a friend.
Absolutely, dude. And I'm happy to call you a friend as well. It's
awesome.
Always great. Good conversation.
We'll be seeing you in the near future.
Right.
Thank you all for listening. And thanks to Herbbug for sharing that difficult story. Just a quick editing note. I know that I included one of the questions that had quite a personal story of my own in it, and I debated whether to include it in the episode. I figured it was a bit non sequitur, but I wanted to include as much of our conversation as I could because I figured that was the honest thing to do. So if you enjoyed the episode, thank you very much. Since I'm just getting started with this podcast, the best way for me to grow is by word of mouth. So if you enjoyed the show, share it with a friend. You can find all of our links on our website, pod.co/emotive. I just started an Instagram account and I'll be putting some exclusive photos from each episode. You can follow that at Emotive Podcast. I'm your host, Dan Dahlstead, and our music is by the talented Data Rebel. I'll see you next week with a conversation with the creator of Gene Shift, Ben Johnson, and his story of a decade of game development. Take care, everyone.